The city of Varnus was bright at the top and broken at the bottom. Up above, people lived in floating houses made of glass and light. They wore silver robes and traveled in quiet skyships. They never walked. They never worked with their hands. Down below, under the bridges and the glowing towers, lived the workers, the fixers, the forgotten. They walked in mud. They lived near pipes that hissed steam and leaked rust. These people were not called citizens. They were just low folk. Among them lived a young girl named Mira. She had short dark hair, tired eyes, and hands that always smelled like old metal. Every day, she fixed broken fans, bent tools, and cracked panels. She was good at her work. People in her district liked her, but the people above didn't know her name. Once every year, the nobles from above held the charity parade. It was not real charity. It was a show. They floated down in bright ships and threw silly gifts at the poor. Broken gadgets, useless toys. Once, someone threw a bent spoon and laughed. This year, Mira was standing at the back of the crowd. She had no interest, but her neighbor had asked her to help carry supplies. The parade passed by slowly, nobles smiling and waving like actors in a play. Then one noble tall man with shiny boots and silver rings spotted Mira. He leaned down, picked up a small metal cage from his floating platform, and grinned. Here, he said loudly so everyone could hear. For the girl who smells like rust, a perfect match. The crowd looked. Inside the cage was a strange creature. It was small, about the size of a loaf of bread. Its fur was thin and patchy, a dull brown. Its eyes glowed softly like the tiny suns. It had four short legs, a round nose, and little jaws that clicked together as it sniffed. Some people laughed. What is that? It looks sick. A trash pet, the noble chuckled. A rust mite. Let it eat your workshop, little fixer. Mira said nothing. She took the cage gently. The creature inside blinked at her. Then the noble ship moved on, and the crowd followed. Mira walked home alone. Her home was a small cube made of old metal sheets and scrap panels. It sat on top of an old pipe that made soft humming sounds at night. Inside, she had a workbench, a bedroll, a water tank, and shelves of tools. She placed the cage on the table and opened the latch. The creature stepped out slowly. It sniffed the air. Then it looked up at her and let out a tiny squeak. Mira blinked. You're not so bad, she said quietly. The creature squeaked again and rubbed its face against her hand. I'll call you Nib. Later that night, Mira was working on a broken fan. One of her wrenches was covered in rust. She sighed. I should have cleaned this last week. Suddenly, she heard soft clicking. Nib had climbed onto the table. Its eyes glowed brighter. It sniffed the wrench, then carefully placed its mouth on the rusted part. It started chewing. Mira watched with wide eyes. Within seconds, the brown flakes disappeared. The metal underneath shined like new. Nib sat down, licked its face, and squeaked happily. Mira leaned forward. Wait, you actually eat rust? Nib squeaked. She picked up an old gear. Rusted and bent, Nib gobbled it quickly, leaving only smooth, clean edges. Mira's mouth fell open. You're real. You're not just some joke pet. That night, she cleaned all her rusted tools by letting Nib do the work. By morning, her whole toolkit looked new. Over the next few days, Nib stayed close to Mira. It followed her to the workshop, sat beside her toolbox, and helped without being asked. Sometimes it even pointed by squeaking at rusted parts Mira hadn't noticed. Word spread quickly in the lower district. Have you seen Mira's tools? She fixed my heater in 5 minutes. I gave her my rusted pump. Pit works again. Her pet eats rust. I saw it myself. People began to come, bringing broken machines and rusted parts. Mira didn't ask for money. She fixed what she could, and Nib helped out soon. Mira earned more than she had in months. But more importantly, she smiled again. Nib became a friend, not just a pet. One evening, Nib started acting strange. It sniffed the air and squeaked loudly. Then it jumped from Mira's lap and ran outside. Mira followed quickly, grabbing her coat. The little creature ran down the path, past homes and steaming pipes, through the old market square. and toward the edge of the city's underlevel. There, behind a broken wall, was a sealed hatch. Mira had never noticed it before. Nib stood beside it, tail twitching. It let out a soft whimper. Mira touched the hatch. It was cold, metal, sealed, and covered in deep orange rust. A strange symbol was painted on the front, a symbol she had seen before on slave cuffs. Her breath caught. She looked at Nib. "You can feel this?" Nib placed its mouth against the hatch. It began chewing, slowly, quietly. The rust vanished. Mira pushed the hatch open. Behind it was a dark room, empty, silent, filled with old chains, chains locked around nothing now. Chains broken at the base, chains that had once held people. Nib stepped in. It walked to a pile of cuffs, sniffed, and began eating. Mira watched, her chest tight. This wasn't just a rust eater. Nib had a sense for more than metal. It followed pain, and it wanted to set something free. Every day after that, Mira saw something new in Nib. The little creature still ate rust, still cleaned tools and old gears, but now it did more. It started sniffing walls, corners, and old pipes. Sometimes it would stop in front of a spot that looked normal. It would squeak loudly, like it was calling. When Mira checked those spots, she often found rusted locks, broken gates, or chains hidden in the shadows. Nib always chewed them away. People in the lower district began to notice. At first, they came for help with old machines, but slowly, the stories changed. Nib found a hidden door in my basement. It chewed the lock off my uncle's storage crate. It was full of his old tools. My grandma had chains on her, storage tanks from when she was forced to work in the upper city. Nib chewed them off. Mira listened quietly. She didn't ask questions. She only helped, but she began to understand something. Nib wasn't just a pet that cleaned metal. Nib followed the smell of rusted paint chains, locks, and anything that once held people down. One evening, Nib ran out again. Mira followed quickly, just like before. This time, it led her through the older part of the underlevel. Pipes above their heads hissed steam. Old lights blinked slowly. The air smelled like oil and dust. Nib stopped at a metal grate. It was stuck shut, covered in dark brown rust. Behind it, Mira could hear a faint sound, like breathing. "Nib," she whispered. The creature ran forward and began to chew. The grate melted quietly. Mira pulled it open and crawled inside. The room was cold and dark. At first, she saw nothing. Then her eyes adjusted. There, curled up in the corner, were 3 children. They looked thin, tired, and afraid. Rusted cuffs were round their ankles. Chains ran from the cuffs into the wall. One child looked up. His eyes were wide. He didn't speak. Mira knelt down. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. This is Nib." The creature walked forward, sniffed the cuffs, and started chewing. The chains vanished. The smallest girl began to cry. Not from fear, but from relief. Mira held out her hand. "Come with me. You're free now." They followed her home. That night, Mira gave the children warm food, soft blankets, and quiet space. They didn't say much, but one of them, a boy named Talo, whispered to her. "There are others," he said, "hidden rooms, not just this one." Mira nodded. "I believe you." Nib squeaked softly and curled beside them. Over the next few days, Mira's home changed. People came, not just for machine repairs, but with stories. "My cousin went missing last year. My father said he heard voices in the pipe tunnels. There's a locked door in my building no one's opened in years." Mira started following Nib more often. She didn't always understand where they were going, but Nib did each time. They found something hidden in a locked gate, a sealed hatch, an old room buried under stone. And sometimes they found more people, quiet, tired, forgotten. Mira never asked how they got there. She only brought them home. She gave them food, a blanket, and hope. Her small home became a place of safety, a place where chains didn't stay locked. One evening, an old woman came to her door. She had silver hair tied back in a long braid. Her back was straight, her eyes sharp. She looked at Nib and went still. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked. Mira tilted her head. "He's a rust eater, At least, that's what they called him. The woman knelt. She gently touched Nib's head. I haven't seen one of these since I was a child, she whispered. We called them breakers. Long ago, they were used to free people from mental prisons. The nobles feared them. Mira blinked. Why? Because they couldn't be trained, the woman said. They followed pain, and wherever there was cruelty, they chewed it away. Up in the high towers of Varnas, people began to notice. Something was changing. Councilman Vero, one of the oldest nobles, sat at a silver desk and stared at a report. Missing workers. Sealed rooms open, chains found in piles. No signs of struggle, no damage done. What is this? He asked the guard beside him. A story, perhaps, or a problem growing beneath our feet. Vero frowned. Find the cause. Back in the lower district, Mira was fixing a water pump when two guards in clean black suits arrived at her door. They didn't smile. You're Mira? Yes, you've been found helping people without license. I'm fixing machines and releasing workers. Mira stayed silent. One of the guards pointed to Nib. That thing. It's not registered. Hand it over. Mira stood in front of Nib. He's not a tool. He's my friend. The guards looked at each other. Then they left without another word. But Mira knew this was not over. That night, Nib curled up on her lap, quiet and warm. Mira looked out her small window at the stars barely visible through the pipes. She whispered, We're helping people. But they won't like that. Nib squeaked softly. Mira smiled. You're not just a pet. You're something more. And deep in the city, chains trembled on their own. The city of Varnas looked peaceful from above. Floating gardens, shining towers, and quiet sky paths made everything seem perfect. But below, under the silver floors and behind glowing lights, something else was happening. Chains were disappearing. Locks were breaking, and no one saw who was doing it, not even the nobles. Mira's home had become something special. Her small metal house, once filled with broken tools, now held warm beds, extra blankets, and quiet voices. People who were once locked away now came to her with hope. Nib, the little rust-eating creature, had grown more careful. It no longer chewed just anything. It sniffed and searched, always looking for hidden pain. Sometimes it stopped in front of a wall, tilted its head, and squeaked. Mira always followed. Together, they opened doors no one had touched for years. One evening, a girl named Pavy, who Mira had helped earlier, ran into her workshop. Mira, she said, breathless, I found something. Pavy pulled out a map. It was drawn on old cloth with faded ink. My brother used to work under the steam tower. He said there were tunnels, rooms they never let him enter. Mira looked at the map. Nib climbed onto the table and stared at it too. His eyes glowed brighter than usual. He squeaked once, then jumped to Mira's shoulder. Mira nodded. Let's go. They walked past the water lanes, past broken market stalls, and into the oldest part of the underlevel. Few people came here now. The pipes dripped cold water, and the lights barely worked. Pavy led them to a round hatch hidden under a broken walkway. This is it, she said. Mira touched the hatch. It was thick. No handles. No buttons. Nib sniffed once, then pressed his mouth to the edge. Soft chewing began. Bit by bit, the rust melted away. Then, with a soft pop, the hatch slid open. Inside was a tunnel. It was long, dark, and quiet. The air felt heavy. They stepped inside. The tunnel led to a wide room filled with metal crates and tools. But what caught Mira's eye were the walls, chains, locks, hundreds of them. Some were open, some closed. Some were broken halfway, and in the center of the room was a long table covered in old cuffs. This was not just a storage room. This was a place where chains were made and repaired. Nib stepped forward. He sniffed the table and let out a strange sound, something between a growl and a whimper. Then he began to chew. Chains vanished, one by one. Mira didn't speak. She only watched as they left the room. Mira saw something written on the wall. Silence keeps order. Chains keep peace. She frowned. Outside, a quiet crowd had gathered. Word had spread. People came, not to take pictures or shout, but to simply look. They saw broken locks. They saw free spaces. One older man whispered, "I was locked in a place like this years ago." Another said, "My daughter disappeared from this district. She never came back." Mira looked at them. She didn't give speeches. She only said, "If you know where more places like this are, show me." Dozens of hands raised. That week, Mira visited 6 more hidden rooms everywhere she went. Nib found rusted locks, cuffs, and metal bars. He never chewed machines, only what once held people down. And every time a lock fell open, someone felt lighter. Up in the higher levels, the nobles met behind crystal walls. Councilman Vero stood before a large round table. His face was calm, but his voice was sharp. "Chains are disappearing," he said. "Rooms we sealed long ago are being opened." Another noble, Lady Van, waved her hand. "It's just poor people playing games." Vero placed a photo on the table. "This is the girl, and this is her creature." The photo showed Mira, with Nib on her shoulder. The little rust-eater's eyes were glowing. "She's no ordinary fixer," Vero said, "and that creature is not a toy. It's a breaker." The room went silent. "Breakers were banned," someone whispered. "They haven't existed in years." Vero nodded. "And yet, one walks among us." The nobles voted quietly. "Bring her in," Vero said. "Let's see what this girl really wants." 2 days later, Mira received a message. A small drone floated to her door and played a soft tone. "You were requested by the high table," it said. Mira looked around her small home. Children were playing outside. Neighbors were repairing a roof. The air felt lighter than it ever had. Nib climbed onto her shoulder. Mira nodded. "Let's go." The skylift took her to the highest tower. It was the first time Mira had ever seen the top of the city. Everything was clean. The roads glowed. The windows sparkled. But it all felt quiet. At the high table, 10 nobles sat in silver chairs. Vero stood in the center. "You are Mira," he said. "Yes, this pet of yours. It breaks our locks." "He's not a pet," she said softly. "His name is Nib, and he only breaks what should not stay locked." Vero's eyes narrowed. "And who decides what should be free?" Mira looked at him. "Pain does." The nobles laughed quietly. Vero did not. "We demand you surrender the creature," he said. "No, this is not a request." Still, Mira stood calmly. "Then you will stay here," Vero said, pressing a button. A crystal cage rose from the floor, surrounding Mira and Nib. It sealed with a soft hum. Nib tilted his head, but he didn't move. He didn't chew. Not yet. Vero smiled. "Let's see how strong your creature really is." Mira didn't speak, but deep in the city below, chains began to tremble again. Around Mira was clear, cold, and smooth. She could see the tall room, the nobles in their silver chairs, and the glowing city beyond the wide glass windows. But she could not move. The walls of the cage hummed quietly, like they were alive. Nib sat beside her, calm and still. His eyes glowed softly. He made no sound. Councilman Vero stepped closer. His voice was polite, but sharp. "You've helped many," he said. "Fixed machines, opened doors, free people." Mira stayed quiet. "Now, we ask again, give us the creature. We will study it. You may return home after that." Mira looked down at Nib, then back at Vero. "He's not a tool," she said. "He chooses what to do. Not me." Vero's lips tightened. "Very well," he said. He turned and walked out of the room. The crystal walls remained. The lights above dimmed slowly. Time passed. Mira sat cross-legged. Nib rested beside her. Neither spoke. Down in the lower district, the air began to change. First, a group of children noticed something strange. Their old chains, ones they had hidden under floorboards or buried in crates, were gone. Then, a young woman fixing her stair rail saw the rust melt away on its own. By nightfall, the people of the lower levels felt it, even without Nib present. Chains were unlocking, locks were clicking open, and sealed doors were no longer sealed. A whisper spread. Mira has been taken, but the chains are still breaking. She is not alone. She woke the city. Back in the crystal cage, Nib lifted his head. His eyes glowed brighter now. Mira leaned close. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly. Nib squeaked once. His fur rose slightly, like static. Then he walked to the corner of the cage. He sniffed it. He opened his small jaws and gave a gentle bite. Nothing. The crystal did not respond. Nib squeaked again, softly. He tried the other side. Bit again. Still nothing. Mira gently touched the floor. This isn't like metal, she whispered. It's alive or made to resist your gift. But Nib didn't stop. He kept walking, sniffing, testing. He was searching for something, maybe a weakness or maybe a feeling. Mira waited. Meanwhile, the nobles met again. Councilman Veros spoke first. She refuses to give up the creature. Lady Ven raised an eyebrow. And yet, chains continued to open below. We have fewer workers now than we did last month. Another noble said, we should silence the story, remove her quietly. No, said Vero. We will use her. Show her in public. Let the people see she is controlled. Let them believe the pet is now ours. The others nodded slowly. But before the meeting ended, a message arrived. A guard ran in. His voice was shaky. Sir, the old holding rooms, they're empty. Vero stood up. What? Every sealed chain we've checked is broken. Every slave room we had locked no longer holds anyone. A long silence filled the room. Then someone whispered, is the creature still in the cage? Back inside the tower, Nib was pacing now. His movements were faster, sharper. Then, without warning, he stopped. He stood in the middle of the crystal floor, eyes glowing bright gold. Mira sat up. The hum of the cage changed. It rose in pitch. Then it stopped. Silence. Then a soft crack. Tiny line formed on the crystal wall. Nib didn't bite it. He had sensed something, a flaw. Maybe energy out of balance. He walked up to the crack and placed one gentle paw on it. The crystal let out a soft pop, and a second later, a piece fell. Away like a puzzle piece. Mira stood slowly. The cage was open. Nib squeaked happily. Mira smiled. Let's go. The guards outside never saw her leave. The doors didn't break. The alarms didn't ring. Somehow, Mira and Nib passed through the halls without sound, without trouble. It was like the city itself let them go. Back in the lower district, Mira returned home. The people saw her coming and gathered in silence. They didn't cheer. They didn't shout. They just stood around her with soft smiles and hopeful eyes. You're back. One old man said, yes, Mira replied. A child pointed to the sky. But they'll come again. Mira nodded. They might. Another voice asked, what do we do? Mira looked at the streets. They were cleaner now. Not shining like the upper city, but honest. People were helping each other, sharing food, fixing lights, rebuilding homes. She said, we stay together. We don't hide. And we keep helping each other. That night, something new happened. Nib ran out again, but this time, he was not alone. Other creatures followed him. Smaller, slower, but with the same glowing eyes. No one knew where they had come from. Maybe they had woken up, or maybe Nib had called them. They spread through the city into pipes, tunnels, locked rooms, and forgotten halls, and every chain they found was devoured. In the upper levels, Vero stood at his wide window. He watched the soft lights below, hundreds of them moving, flickering, like stars coming to life underground. He turned to his guards. We waited too long, he said. A soft creak echoed through his office. He looked down. A rusted patch had formed on his chair made of the best metal in the city. His eyes widened. Then he heard a tiny squeak behind the wall. The city of Varnas was no longer quiet, not because of noise, not because of crowds, but because something had changed in the air. Something unseen but deeply felt. Chains were gone. Locks had vanished. Doors that had stayed shut for years were now open. In the lower levels, the people stood taller. They walked with purpose. They fixed homes, planted food, helped each other. No one told them what to do. They just did it. And up in the shining towers above, the nobles noticed. Councilman Vero stood in the center of the Hall of Control. Tall silver windows lined the walls. 10 nobles sat around a glowing table. Screens floated above them, showing maps of the city, red lights blinking where slave rooms had once been sealed. All the red lights were gone, every chain, Vero said slowly, every holding cell, every hidden worker unit. It's all been opened. Lady Ven crossed her arms. You said she would be easy to control. She escaped, Vero said. The cage failed. How? Vero did not answer. His mind was still replaying the sound of that soft pop as the crystal cracked. A creature that small should not have broken it, but it did not, and now others like it had appeared. The council decided quickly. We cannot stop them by force, said one noble. The Rust Eaters are quiet. They don't destroy, they simply undo. Then we must try something else, said Vero. He looked at the camera screen showing Mira, standing in her small home, surrounded by people. She wants peace, he said. Let's offer her peace, our peace. A skyship arrived the next morning. It landed gently in the lower district, for the first time in years. It did not hover above or look down. It came low, and a noble stepped out alone. He was younger than the others, dressed simply, with no crown or silver cape. His name was Giran, and he had a soft voice. Mira watched as he walked up to her house. Nib sat on her shoulder, calm and quiet. I come to speak, Giran said. No guards, no orders, only a message. Mira nodded. Speak. Giran looked around at the people gathered near her. The council sees what is happening, and we wish to understand. They asked for a meeting, a real one. No cages, no tricks. Mira raised an eyebrow. They kept me in a cage. I know. Giran said. That was wrong. He took a slow breath. They offer a seat at the table. Not just for you, for your people. Whispers spread through the crowd. Mira stayed quiet for a moment. Then she said, I will come, but I bring others. With me. As many as you like, Giran replied. 3 days later, a large group from the lower district arrived at the high hall. No chains, no guards. Just people, mechanics, cooks, builders, and children walking proudly beside Mira. Nib sat on her shoulder. 3 more Rust Eaters followed behind, their eyes glowing softly. Inside the tall room, the nobles waited. They had never seen so many low folk in one place. Lady Ven looked uncomfortable. Another noble whispered, this was a mistake. Vero stood. Let us begin. Mira stepped forward. Vero looked at her carefully. You broke many of our systems, he said. Yet, you left no damage. I only removed pain, Mira said. Vero nodded slowly. Then tell us, what do you want? The room fell silent. Mira looked around. She saw faces that once feared to speak. She saw children once locked away now. Standing in the light, she said, I don't want to rule you. I don't want your towers or your ships. She paused. I want no more chains. Whispers rose again. One noble said, we don't use chains anymore. A voice from the crowd answered, you just hide them better. Another added, in your systems, in your rules. Mira spoke again. We want open roads, shared schools, clean water. We want a chance, not charity. We want to fix what was broken, not be ignored again. Vero looked at the others. Lady Ven stood. And if we say no, Nib's eyes glowed brighter. So did the other Rust Eaters. Mira didn't smile, but her voice was calm. Then your chains will keep breaking, with or without me. The nobles fell into silence. They had machines, they had rules. But now, they faced something different. They faced people who were no longer afraid. Later that night, Mira stood at the edge of a platform looking down at the lower city. Giran came to stand beside her. You spoke well, he said. I spoke truth. He looked at Nib, who was sleeping on her shoulder. Are there more of them? Yes, Mira said. Not just in our city. I think they're waking up everywhere. Giran nodded. It feels like something big is coming. Mira didn't reply right away. She was watching the lights below. Homes being repaired. Songs being sung. Food being shared. It's already here, she said. Back in the noble tower, Vero sat alone in his office. He touched the arm of his chair again. That rusted patch had grown. He had scrubbed it earlier, painted it, replaced the panel. But now it was back. And this time, it was warm. He leaned close. He heard something, a soft, steady squeak. The city of Varnas was changing. and everyone could feel it. No one shouted. No one marched. But something powerful moved through the streets. Freedom. Not loud and angry, but calm, steady. An unshakable. In the lower district, buildings once forgotten now stood tall with fresh paint and clean lights. Neighbors helped each other without being told. Kids ran freely in alleys that once held fear. The air was different. It felt lighter. And at the heart of it all was Mira and her small, quiet friend Nib. The rust-eaten creature who once came in a cage. Nib had changed too. He was still small, still soft, and still had glowing eyes. But now, he moved with purpose. He no longer searched just for old rusted tools. He sniffed out hidden locks, sealed boxes, and broken systems, anything built to hold someone down, and he was not alone. More rust-eaters had appeared, 10, then 20, now more than anyone could count. No one knew where they had come from. Some said they came from the earth. Others said they had simply been waiting. Wherever they went, chains broke, not by force, not with fire, just gentle bites and soft squeaks and the metal that once trapped. People simply fell away. In the tall towers above, the nobles tried to stay calm. Some of them left quietly. They sold their sky homes and flew away to other cities. Others tried to hide behind new rules and words, but Councilman Vero stayed. He watched from his window every day, hoping the rust would stop. But it didn't. He replaced his desk. It rusted. Again, he locked his door. It unlocked itself. He even wrapped a silver band around his wrist just to prove control. One morning, he woke up to find Nib sitting quietly on his bed. Vero froze. Nib didn't bite anything. He didn't growl or run. He just looked at Vero. And squeaked. Once. Then he left. Vero said nothing. But that day, he took the silver band off his wrist. In the lower city, Mira walked through the streets. Everywhere she went, people waved or nodded. She didn't see herself as a leader. She still fixed machines, still shared food, and still listened more than she talked. But people believed in her, not because she had power, but because she had helped them remember something important. They were not broken. They were not worthless. They were not meant to live in chains. One day, a small girl named Rena ran up to Mira. Her arms were full of metal pieces. "Mira, look," she said, excited. "Me and my brother made this from the scrap pile." It was a small windmill built from old fan blades and wire. It turned gently in the breeze. "You did this?" Mira asked. Rena nodded proudly. "We made 3 already. One for the garden lights, one for the water tank, and one for Grandma's roof." Mira smiled. "That's beautiful." Rena hugged her, then ran off again. Nib squeaked happily beside Mira's feet. This was what she had always wanted. Not a perfect city, just one where people had the chance to grow, build, and live without fear. But not everyone was happy. Far beyond Varnus, on other planets connected to the old noble system, news had spread. They had heard about the Rust Girl and the Breaker Beasts. Some laughed, some ignored it. But a few powerful leaders felt something else. Fear. If one city could wake up, others could too. They sent messages to Varnus. Stop it. Silence. Her. Capture the creatures. Do something. But no one in Varnus wanted to go back. The nobles who remained had already begun to change. They now shared buildings, listened to the lower citizens, and even helped clean their own spaces. Giran, the young noble who first spoke to Mira, now lived in a small home near the center of the city. He taught children how to write and listened to ideas from local builders. "I never knew this city was so big," he once said. "We just floated above it." Now he walked through it every day. One quiet evening, Mira climbed to the top of an old tower that overlooked both the upper city and the lower district. Nib sat on her shoulder, looking out. The stars above were clear. The city lights below were soft. She thought about how far they had come, from being laughed at in the charity parade to breaking the city's invisible walls. Nib gave a soft squeak. Mira turned. Behind her stood a young girl, Rena again, holding something small in her hands. "We found it," she said, opening her palms. It was a metal ring, half buried in dirt, old, rusted, with symbols of control. probably from the early slave systems. Nib climbed down, sniffed it, and gently chewed. It vanished. Just like that, Rena giggled. He's fast, Mira smiled. He always finds what needs to go. That night, a strange quiet filled the city. Not fear, not sadness. Just peace. For the first time in a very long time, there were no chains left to break. And people didn't wait for orders anymore. They built, sang, cooked, planted, laughed. Not because they had to, because they wanted to, because they were free. Back in his empty office, Vero stood by the window once again. He looked down at the city below, so different now. A soft wind blew in from the open window. It carried the smell of clean earth, cooked food, and something else. Hope. He whispered to no one in particular. So, this is what happens when the chains are gone. And for once, he smiled. The sky above Varnus turned golden as the sun slowly rose. Its light touched rooftops, windows, and walkways, places that had once known only shadows. It was a new day, and the people could feel it deep in their hearts. Mira stood near the large, gathering square. It had once been a place where orders were shouted and people stood in silence. Now, it was filled with laughter, music, and the soft hum of machines built by free hands. Children painted walls with bright colors. Elders sat under trees and shared stories. Builders, thinkers, and teachers moved together, planning what to grow, fix, or improve. And in the middle of it all sat Nib, the small rust-eaten creature who had once been a joke, now a symbol of hope. Many had expected Mira to lead everything after the change, but she refused to stand above others. Instead, she encouraged circles, not thrones, teams, not titles. Every street had its own voice now. Every worker had a say. The city had become a place where ideas were more powerful than rules, and hearts led more than hands. And still, the rust eaters worked quietly, seeking out what was broken and gently cleaning it away. They never stopped, not because someone told them to, but because they understood something simple. Freedom needs care. One day, a ship arrived. It was quiet and old, but strong. Its wings were made of polished metal, and its engines glowed softly. The people gathered, curious but calm. It was not a ship of war. There were no loud commands or guards. A small group stepped out. They wore simple clothes and had tired eyes. They were from another world, a place where people were still locked, watched, and told they were nothing. "We heard about the Rust City," one of them said. "We didn't believe it, but we had to see." Mira walked forward. "You're welcome here," she said kindly. "No one is less. No one is left behind." The group looked at each other, then slowly smiled. They didn't want to rule. They just wanted to breathe. After that, more came. From far places, from quiet moons, from old mining stations and silent farms. Not everyone stayed, but all of them left changed. They saw something that most had forgotten. A city without fear is not wild, it is alive. One old man, visiting from the frozen rings of Elrond, whispered to Mira, "They called you weak once, but this is the strongest city I've ever seen." Mira only smiled. "It's not mine," she said. "It's everyone's." In time, the city grew, but not in the old way. Not taller walls or richer towers. It grew in connection. Bridges were built between old zones. Gardens climbed rooftops. Schools opened in places that had never had books. Children were now learning science, art, and history, but also kindness, balance, and how to listen. And Mira? She still repaired broken machines, still helped clean old pipes, still shared her food when someone forgot theirs. She was never above others, but somehow always at the center. One evening, as the stars began to shine, Rena, the young girl who once brought scrap metal to Mira, stood beside her on a hill. She was older now, taller and smarter. She had just finished building a wine-powered cleaner that could water plants and light homes. Rena asked, "Mira, do you ever think about the day they gave you Nib?" Mira looked at her gently. "Every day. They thought they were being mean, right?" Rena said. "They gave him to you as a joke." "Yes," Mira nodded. "But kindness grew from it." Rena paused. "How?" Because, Mira said slowly, I didn't give up, and Nib didn't either. We didn't try to hurt them back. We just kept fixing what was broken. Rena smiled. And now, the whole city is different. Mira looked out over the lights, the homes, and the people below. Yes, she whispered. Because hope spreads quietly, like rust, but in reverse, far away. On a planet that still lived under rules and shadows, a group of leaders sat in a large cold hall. They looked at a glowing screen showing images of Varnus. They had once tried to stop it, send warnings, spread lies. But the city didn't fall. It didn't fight back. It simply thrived. And now, even their own people whispered about Mira, about Nib, about the place where chains no longer worked. One leader stood up. We can't control this, he said. Not anymore. Another one sighed. No, he said, but maybe. We can learn from it. Back in Varnus, Nib squeaked softly and curled up beside Mira's toolbox. He was tired, but peaceful. Not every chain had been broken in the galaxy. But here, in this city, the first links were gone. And people had remembered the most important truth. They were not made to be owned. They were meant to build, to grow, to care. The next morning, Mira placed a new sign near the city gates. It was carved from old ship metal. The words were simple. Rust is not the end. It's a sign to begin again. Below the words was a small drawing of Nib. Mira smiled, brushed the dust away, and turned toward the sunrise. There was still work to do. Not to rule, not to fight, but to build a better way. And she knew now she would never be alone again.